Speak up or shut up. Should music artists who condemn the Gaza violence and massacres be concerned about retaliation? If so, from whom? They say the cost of speaking out can be high, the rewards even greater, as artists contribute to a long tradition of musicians who have dared to challenge the status quo in pursuit of a better world. Since October 7, 2023, when 1,138 Israelis were killed in a cross-border attack from Hamas fighters in southern Israel, the Israeli response has been horrific. They have completely destroyed Gaza, setting back millions of people into the Stone Age. The attacks by Israel on Gaza, led by its Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, have resulted in the deaths of over 41,000 Palestinians. A significant portion of these casualties, more than half, are women and children. While the exact numbers are hard to obtain because so many remain buried under rubble, best guess estimates say between at least 10,000 to as high as 25,000 children have been murdered in Gaza during this period. This staggering loss reflects the severe impact on Gaza's population, with children reportedly being killed at a rate of 1 every 10 minutes. The conflict has also left tens of thousands of people injured and displaced, contributing to the humanitarian crisis in the region. Welcome to Punish Radio. Let's talk music. This is your host, Lily Sophia Davies. Today we are talking about social justice activism in music. So let's get started. Gaza remains on fire. As we do this podcast, Lebanon is now under attack by Israel, openly funded by billions of U.S. taxpayer dollars from the United States. The Middle East continues to be a global powder keg. Most of the world is still perplexed as to why this is still happening in our globally connected 21st century age. I mean, we know that this has been going on now for over 100 years. Why can't global thinkers resolve this situation? Why are humans still enduring this 20th century failure? I mean, since 1917, when the Middle East was carved up by the British and French after they took control of the Middle East from the Germans and their allies, the Ottoman Empire, there has been nothing but chaos, mayhem, war, and murder in the Middle East. As for the indigenous Palestinians, it has been an abject disaster. Millions have fled their homes since the European settlers took over their homes and created the European settler state of Israel in 1948. Those that were not part of the exodus, that moved so many of them to Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan, ended up in the West Bank and Gaza as refugees in camp, pushed over the decades in a living in squalor, completely under the control of Israel and their funding body, the USA. And now, the open-air prison of Gaza is obliterated, and the whole world saw the destruction live on their social media feeds. Horrified, the UN has tried to rein in Israel and United States, but they simply don't care to listen, and no one has leverage over them. So what's the world to do? What can good people who care do? Well, in our world, where music has often been used as a platform for activism and protest, many artists have taken it upon themselves to stand up for human rights and speak out against violence. One of the most pressing and polarizing issues in recent years is the ongoing conflict in Gaza. With bombings, blockades, and the complex web of historical grievances, many musicians have chosen to address the humanitarian crisis in their work, using their platforms to call for peace and justice. However, standing up for human rights in conflict zones like Gaza comes with its risks. Artists who raise their voices may wonder if they will face retaliation for their stance, and if so, from whom? We know that the great John Lennon was a huge activist. Yes, he was a musician, singer, and songwriter who rose to fame as a member of the Beatles, one of the most popular and influential bands in the history of rock music. But in addition to his musical talents, Lennon was also known for his political views, political songs, and political activism. He was so famous for his activism that U.S. President Richard Nixon ordered his Justice Department to investigate him to get him deported from the United States. Nixon considered him a threat to his policies. So we know that there can be retaliation from political groups and governments. One of the most immediate concerns for artists speaking out about Gaza is the potential for retaliation from these political groups and governments. The Israeli oppression of these indigenous peoples now living under occupation in Gaza and the West Bank is highly charged. Speaking out against violence in Gaza can attract negative attention from governments or lobby groups who are deeply invested on the Israeli side of the conflict. Moreover, in some cases, governments may put pressure on artists to silence their dissent. Take artist Roger Waters of Pink Floyd. He has been super vocal about his support for Palestinian rights. He has already faced backlash, including canceled concerts and travel restrictions. Roger Waters has been to the pathetic Israeli Berlin Wall that separates and divides people on the West Bank. He has condemned it openly. Pro-Israel groups have also been known to organize boycotts or call for bans on musicians they perceive as anti-Israel. These pressures can manifest as lost performance opportunities, censored work, or restricted access to certain markets. Governments, too, might not always be welcoming of criticism. Countries involved in the conflict or aligned with Israel may blacklist artists or block their content from reaching audiences. So one must be mindful. In severe cases, artists may face visa rejections or even be declared persona non grata, barring them from entering certain nations altogether. All this because they stand for human rights. I know. It's insane and ass-backward. Now, even former U.S. President Donald Trump, who is running again to become the U.S. president recently, said he would use state resources to close down media criticizing him. This is about controlling the media narrative. It has zero to do with freedom of expression. Clearly fascist, Trump could care less about freedom. So one can also assume he would come down hard on human rights activists and celebrities who use their standing to speak out for good. But as of this podcast, he's not the U.S. president, but he could be, so that's something to keep an eye on. Nevertheless, this week, music artist Johnny Punish wrote a song about Netanyahu called "Serial Killer in a Suit." He says, hey, if you murder over 40,000 human beings, including over 25,000 kids, you're getting your very own song. That's how I roll. Here's an excerpt from the song performed by the Psychotic Furs, available on all streaming services.
Somebody, anybody, everybody. Serial killer in a suit. Serial killer in a suit. Serial killer. What the fuck?
Punish goes on to say, does that hurt some people's feelings? Well, if someone is okay with murdering 25,000 children, well, yeah, I can see that. Let me see. Charles Manson, Jeffrey Dahmer, Son of Sam, Genghis Khan, Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, and Mao Zedong. Yep, lots of people will probably condemn my song and position on this issue. So yeah, I can see that. Sarcastically, he says, I suppose they won't be inviting me to their murder parties, eh? Another potential source of retaliation comes from the public itself. In the age of social media, where public discourse is fast-paced and often divisive, artists speaking up about Gaza may face online harassment, trolling, or even threats. Social media platforms can amplify both support and criticism, and often, politically charged issues like Gaza attract some of the most passionate and hostile responses. Some fans may feel alienated by an artist's political stance, leading to a decline in support, fewer streams, and even boycott campaigns. Moreover, organized online campaigns can target artists to discredit them or spread misinformation, leading to reputational damage that is difficult to undo. This backlash is not limited to artists speaking out in favor of Palestinian rights. Those perceived to be too pro-Israel may also face retaliation, especially in countries or communities where Palestinian solidarity is strong. Cancel culture is everywhere now. In some countries, you're a hero. In some, a zero. Heck, in some Facebook groups, an artist will be panned while in another celebrated. So what are artists to do? Do they turn into vanilla ice cream to please everyone? I mean, what is the point of art without the expression of feelings, ideas, and thoughts? Punish goes on to say, playing all sides is just weird. We see politicians try to do it all the time. They say one thing to one group and another completely different thing to an opposing group, always telling them what they want to hear. Truth? Nah. What's that anyway? But we the people are watching. Media is now available almost everywhere on planet Earth. We can see the ruse, but they still job on as if we don't see and hear them. Open contempt. On a side note, do you know who is the world's greatest mass murderer? If you guessed Hitler, you'd be super wrong. In fact, both Hitler and Stalin were outdone by Mao Zedong. From 1958 to 1962, his Great Leap Forward policy led to the deaths of up to 45 million people, easily making it the biggest episode of mass murder ever recorded. By the way, another great artist known for activism is the great Bob Dylan. He made a significant impact on the civil rights movement in the United States through his activism and support for the cause. He performed at numerous civil rights rallies and events, using his platform to raise awareness about the struggle for racial equality and justice. The U.S. government and groups like the racist KKK weren't enamored with Dylan. But who was the right side of history? In the commercial music industry, speaking out about sensitive topics can also lead to repercussions from corporate stakeholders. Record labels, sponsors, and media platforms often prefer to steer clear of political controversy. If an artist's stance on Gaza leads to controversy, they may face pressure from corporate partners to tone down their activism or avoid certain topics altogether. Music is a business, and companies tied to an artist's success may fear alienating a segment of the market or drawing unwanted media attention. This commercial pressure can result in reduced support. Oh, just another thought. Joe Strummer, the iconic frontman of The Clash, was deeply committed to using music as a platform for political activism and social justice. His position was that music should be a force for positive change, and he consistently infused his songs with messages addressing political, social, and economic inequalities. Strummer believed that music had the power to challenge the status quo and raise awareness about social injustices. In The Clash's songs, particularly in albums like London Calling and Sandinista, he tackled issues like poverty, war, racial injustice, and class struggle. Tracks like White Riot and London Calling spoke to the frustrations of disenfranchised youth and the need for rebellion against oppressive systems. For Strummer, punk rock wasn't just a genre, but a movement that could incite real-world action and social change. Strummer was staunchly anti-fascist and anti-authoritarian. He spoke out against racism, imperialism, and economic exploitation, often aligning himself with working-class struggles. He believed in solidarity with oppressed communities worldwide, famously supporting causes like the Sandinista movement in Nicaragua, which inspired The Clash's Sandinista album. His lyrics frequently advocated for unity. So there is a long history of artists speaking out and not shutting up. Nevertheless, for independent artists who lack the support of major labels, the risk of retaliation can be even more financially perilous. Those who speak out may find it difficult to secure sponsorships or collaborations, and there could be reduced demand for their music from platforms that wish to avoid political controversy. However, it's worth noting that in some cases, standing up for human rights can galvanize support, particularly from fans who share similar values. Music has always been a force for social change, and some artists have turned moments of controversy into opportunities to build stronger, more loyal fan bases. Thousands of musicians recently signed a letter for a Gaza ceasefire. Zach De La Rocha, Tom Morello, Bikini Kill, Pulp, Lucy Dacus, Mogwai, Kali Uchis are among the thousands of musicians who have signed an open letter calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. More than 4,000 artists have come together under the Collective Musicians for Palestine, demanding a ceasefire as the war in Israel and Gaza continues. In the final analysis, artists who stand up for human rights and condemn violence, especially in conflict zones like Gaza, must be aware of the potential for retaliation. This backlash can come from a range of sources, including governments, industry players, fan bases, activist groups, and financial stakeholders. Yet the decision to speak out often transcends concerns of personal or professional risk. It is about using art as a platform for truth and justice. In the end, while the cost of speaking out can be high, the rewards, both personally and socially, can be even greater, as these artists contribute to a long tradition of musicians who have dared to challenge the status quo in pursuit of a better world. Okay, that's our presentation. So if you like this information, please like, subscribe, follow, and share with your social media. It helps us get the word out and keeps the music playing. Have a terrific music day.